Hello, hello. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I've been training as a Buddhist for about 21 years and as a Dragon Gate Taoist for another 6 years or so. And it's been a while since I did an open Q&A, so I figured I'd go live at a time when a bit more of the world is alive and awake and available to ask questions and potentially get some answers about Buddhism. So please do, at your leisure, hop in and ask some questions. And while I'm waiting for people to hop in, since this is an unusual time for me to be going live, I'll just start out with what's on my mind. So, kind of exciting. Neil Ripsky and I have been talking for the last couple of months about trying to get him out here to hang out and do some stuff, and he should be coming out this October, so that'll be good fun. And for those of you who don't know what's going on with Neil Ripsky, I've been working with him for about I've known him for a couple of years, but I've been working with him to promote the 18 Lohan Palm system for about a month or so. And 18 Lohan Palm, really, really interesting system of Chinese internal martial arts, a bit like the grandfather of Tai Chi, grandfather of Bagua, Xingyi. All the great internal arts have a relationship to 18 Lohan Palm. And Neil has also trained in the great three Chinese internal arts. So he's trained in Tai Chi, he's trained in Bagua, he's trained in Xingyi. He's also trained in drunken boxing and a number of other Chinese arts. So he knows these arts fairly well, to say the very least about him. And so it's quite exciting to have him entering a time in his life where he wants to pass the entire system of, roughly speaking, everything he knows through his 18 Lohan Palm system. So that is what I've been up to the last several weeks rather, is working on videos and working on getting the website up for him and all this sort of thing. So now I'm back at it. I'm back at doing Q&As. I'm back at making content that is the regular content for the channel. So there should be, hopefully, very soon a new Buddhist PhD Responds going up for those who are interested in that kind of thing. And here I am going live answering your questions. So please, if you have questions about Buddhism, pop them into the chat and I'll take them in the order of the chat. This is the way that I normally do it. Quite often the chat gets a bit chaotic. Quite often there's a bit of a backlog because I like to take my time and answer questions properly. So if you'd like to support the channel and you'd like to be put to the top of the list, you can send through a donation using one of the links at the bottom of the you can put a donation through in one of the links and then just mention that in your question and I'll see it at the bottom of the chat. Okay. So since the people that are supporting the channel allow me to do it for free for everyone else, I put them at the front of the line answering their questions. I think that's fair, since I owe them and everyone else owes them for their kind contribution. So please do chip in if you have comments, questions, things you'd like to know about Buddhism. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking about a few questions that have come in over the last few weeks. So one example is this. There's been a lot of talk online. I don't know how these things have gotten started, but there's been a lot of talk about the overlap between Buddhism and Christianity. And I always find this subject fascinating because I've actually studied theology. I studied theology as an undergraduate, and I studied theology again when I was getting my master's degree. And I find this whole subject surprising because there's not that much overlap between the two. And in terms of the specifics, very little overlaps actually. In terms of generalities, there are common elements. There are common elements, and some of those are quite important things, like let's call it the spiritual struggle. So if you're a person who's living in the real world in the 21st century and you're trying to train in religion, you're trying to train in meditation, you're trying to train in contemplation and ethics, good character in the midst of living in the real world, one of the things you have to contend with is that the real world is going to be pushing back on your development. The real world is not set up to support your development of contemplation or concentration, or very often not set up very well to support your training in good ethics and good character either. So because of this, there is a certain, what I call, spiritual struggle. There's a striving that a person is going through if they're sincerely training in whatever religion they happen to be training in. And this is shared in common between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, who are also religious people, like Christians, Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Jains. Everyone I've met who's sincerely on a spiritual path has this quality of spiritual struggle. And so we share that in common. There are some other qualities also that are shared in common, but largely, the things that Buddhism teaches that it seems to share in common with Christianity, quite often, if you drill in and really ask hard questions, you find out that they're not that similar at all. I'll give you an example. So consider love, right? This is something I think most people would hit on and go, look, Jesus taught love. The Buddha taught metta, which is love. The Buddha taught agape, which is this all-encompassing love for all people. And the Buddha taught metta, which is likewise some kind of all-encompassing love. Aren't those really similar? Well, maybe. Maybe they are. Let's take a closer look, right? As far as Christian theology is concerned, the only people that are people are human beings. There's nothing else has a soul. Nothing else has something in it that goes from lifetime to lifetime. So from a Buddhist standpoint, not only is the loving kindness you generate going to be pointed way beyond human beings, it's going to be pointed at heavenly beings, first of all, like gods who believe that they're creator gods but aren't actually creator gods. Your metta is going to be pointed at them. Your metta is going to be pointed at beings in the divine realms. Your metta is going to be pointed at beings in the lower realms, at animals, at human beings. And it is universal. It extends way beyond just having loving kindness for other humans, right? So already this is getting to be quite different. And then when you ask, well, what is the content of that love? What do you mean by love? Well, I don't precisely know what the Christian means when they say love, but I think it has something to do with goodwill, right? That you want things to go well for others, and in particular, maybe you want them to be reborn in heaven. From a Buddhist standpoint, that kind of love is not metta, right? So metta means that you want all beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Happiness is nirvana. The causes of happiness are the conditions that allow you to attain nirvana. You know, you could also have some desire for them to just have nice stuff while they're still stuck in a state of suffering, in out of control rebirth, but largely that the love that you feel is related to a person attaining nirvana, or an animal attaining a rebirth in which they can attain nirvana, or a heavenly being taking a rebirth that isn't so nice so that they aren't distracted by the pleasures of a heavenly realm so that they can attain nirvana, right? So once again, the similarity ends at the surface. So when people say, oh no, Jesus was just a Buddhist in disguise, I don't think so. And the scholars that I know who've studied Jesus's work in great depth, great historical depth, also don't think so. Okay. Messiah asked, is this a question or a statement? When I asked a person if they knew Buddhism, they said, "You mean that religion where you turn into God?" Funny to hear from someone who hasn't studied it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit interesting. I mean, basically uh, all of the Eastern religions, more or less, say that you either already are part of the ultimate creative principle of the universe, right? You're part of Brahma, or you are Brahma, or whatever. You already are that, according to most Asian religions. Uh, when you attain union with the Tao, it's not like you were ever not in union with the Tao. You've never noticed, right? So likewise, in Buddhism, there are some things that are unique to the attainment of Buddhahood, but there are huge numbers of qualities you have that are extremely important qualities that are there before you attain Buddhahood. For example, you're already, from a Buddhist standpoint, an infinite being. You're already an infinite being. You've already taken infinite rebirths in the past, and you will continue infinitely into the future. So this is already how you are. You already produce karma that literally is contributing to the creation of entire universes. So some aspect of you already has the potential to bring into existence entire universes. So this is pretty extraordinary, right? Unfortunately, you don't have it under control, and therefore, you know, what kind of existence you end up in the future maybe won't be as good as this one. Unfortunately, from a Buddhist standpoint, there's a chance that it won't be as good next time. But wherever you end up, it'll be temporary until you attain nirvana and enlightenment. What is enlightenment? There's some debate. Are you turning into a deity? No. No, deities are below what a Buddha is. According to Buddhism, if you became a deity, that would be lower than the status of even a bodhisattva, much less a Buddha. That would be lower than an arhat, much less a Buddha, who's even higher than an arhat. So this is the right. Well, let me address the chat now. It's written in the Isha Putra. He tried to teach Dharma, but they didn't like it in Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. Immortality sucks. Yeah, I mean it has give and takes for sure. If it's out of control, there's this Greek curse. When you didn't like somebody, you would say, "I hope you live forever." Right? It's interesting. It's very interesting. I think a lot of people think they'd like to live forever, but the more you think of it, the more you think about it, there are questions about this, right? Especially if it's the current circumstance where you live forever by appearing to die repeatedly out of control and losing contact with all of the stuff that you thought was important over and over and over again. That's really uncomfortable. This word dukkha, by the way, comes from the word that means an axle hole, an axle hole. So the in a wheel, the place that the axle would go, so the wheel can turn. So if that place isn't right in the center, if it's slightly off center, then every time the wheel goes around, the whole cart jumps, right? And so dukkha is like a bumpy ride. It's a really uncomfortable kind of bumpy ride. It's not a stable ride. Okay. Make a universe in your head. No, if you made a universe in your head would explode. You can't make a universe in your head. You can visualize a bunch of stuff, but visualizing stuff doesn't make it happen, despite what they say in New Age circles. My goodness. Yeah, I mean, if you study a lot of weird stuff on the internet, you'll learn a lot of things that aren't true. That's one of my favorite Abraham Lincoln quotes is everything you read on the internet by the picture of a famous person is not necessarily true. Right. Okay. So there is quite a bit that could be said, of course, on the issue of what the final goals of Buddhism are. That's a pretty interesting discussion if anybody wanted to go there. But please do, if you have general questions about Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist practice, you could just pop it into the chat and that'll keep things rolling. So today, one of my students sent through a message and they were wondering about how it is you take the results that you get from intensive practice, doing more intensive practice in retreat, and how you bring that into real life. And I ended up sending quite a long message to this particular person because it's such an important issue. If you've ever done 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month of retreat, then you know within some period of time, usually not a long time, usually within a few weeks, few months, a year if you're quite lucky, the results of that practice start to decline and you slowly go back to being how you were before. And one of the skills you need to gain if you're trying to become quite competent, quite capable in any of these systems having to do with training your mind is how to take more and more of your practice out of the retreat environment and into the real world. So one of the things I spend quite a bit of time teaching is that exact skill set, right? So if you're training your mind in a retreat environment, you can, for example, be very gentle with your mind. And as a matter of fact, there are benefits to being gentle with your mind because if you're going to do 8 hours or 16 hours a day of practice, and you're going 110% from the word go, you're going to burn out probably within a day or two. You have to sort of gently get yourself into the practice, very gently, very easily. So when you're in retreat, that is generally the recommendation. Be easy with your mind. Just sort of gently observe your mind. Don't try to do anything too harsh or too strong with the mind. Just continue to bring your mind back to the activity, back to the breath, back to the mantra, back to a doing, non-doing, depending on what kind of tradition you're working in at the time. So all of these might be valid recommendations, but in real life, one of the challenges that you have is that unlike retreat or intensive environments, in between every session, you're stirring your mind up. You're getting on social media, you're watching a movie, you're getting in an argument with somebody, you're worried about things going on at work, whatever the case may be, right? And so because of all of this, your mind doesn't stay calm between sessions, and therefore the results you had from the previous session don't carry over very much into the next session. In retreat, it's not like that. You go from session to session, and much of the results of the previous session are carrying over. And so there are skills that you can gain in real life to be able to bring that same kind of capability into more and more activities. So, for example, the way that I teach training and concentration, I teach it using mainly three techniques spread over, roughly speaking, 4 different areas, let's say. So, the first technique, I talk about it all the time in the meditation class. That's now I've moved to Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays for those of you who are following along. The first is intensive breath. So this is a very forceful technique for bringing the mind inside the body, bringing the mind to the object, and holding it on the object with great force. And this is recommended in the classics like Bhavanakrama and a lot of the Tibetan traditions, commentarial traditions. And then I teach people how to meditate while standing. The Buddha said you need to meditate while laying down, seated, standing, and walking. Pretty rare that, well, not super rare, but fairly rare that all of those things are taught nowadays, especially to relatively casual meditators. But if you can learn how to do your practice standing, and you have practices that are very good for being in a standing position, and if you can learn to do your practice walking, which is the next thing that I teach, then you can bring more of your life, more of your activities into the practice, which means that in between sessions, you can maintain a higher quality of mind, a bit like being on retreat. Right? So the next aspect is there's a practice that comes through the Indian Mahasiddha tradition called Mahamudra. And I teach this technique because if you can learn how to meditate on your 5 external senses as objects of meditation, then over the course of time, everything you're doing can become part of the practice, as long as it's not hugely unethical, right? If you can generate a good state of concentration, a state of concentration in which, for example, a non-dual experience of vision, hearing, smell, taste, touch occurs, and you can do that more or less when you want to, most of the time, unless life is really overwhelming you, then through this, you can maintain between sessions a higher quality of mind. Between seated sessions, a higher quality of mind, which means more like retreat, you can learn how to take to not stir the mind as much in between your meditation sessions. And this means, 1, you can take more of your retreat experiences into real life, and 2, you can turn more of real life into actual practice, right? Now you're actually going somewhere. It's no longer just like a little vacation you take at the beginning of the day. You're actually training in something. You're doing something. And for those who aren't aware, all of the most advanced practices are practices you do virtually 24/7. They're not 10 minutes on the cushion. You are permanently changing how you do something, right? You're permanently changing where in your body your attention rests from moment to moment. You're permanently changing the way that your perception deals with your environment in a 360-degree fashion, right? So in order to accomplish something like that while living in the world, you need techniques that function in the real world. And just following your breath gently can't even get you out of, a difficult conversation with another human being, much less become a permanent 24/7 way that you do things. So then finally, the last aspect is rumination meditation, what I call Foundation 5. This is a type of Vipassana or a precursor to Vipassana, depending on who you ask. And what this involves is using logic, reason, observation, thinking things through, building a coherent picture of the world, adjusting your motivations, intentions, attitudes, perception even, and then holding the result of that with the concentration you gained from the previous practices. And through this, you can transform the parts of your character that are there automatically when you're not thinking about it. If you're too arrogant, you can become humble. If your will is too weak, you can make your will stronger. If you're unable to deal with difficulty and loss and pain, you can make your mind more capable of dealing. You can cultivate perseverance in the face of difficulty and pain and so forth. So, like this, between the practices that are just concentration and the practices that are analytic meditation, which is, as far as I can tell, is more or less a sort of unique Buddhist thing, at least in terms of the way that we do it. It's a relatively unique Buddhist thing. Then you have a set of tools that actually functions in real life to transform your character over time. So this is the way. Okay, let me go back and see what's happening in the chat. Buddhism works great for internal work, but externalizing Buddhist concepts is always cringe, especially with other people who are materialistic. No, I think honestly Buddhism is just not very well understood. Buddhism provides... Hey, Barack, welcome. Buddhism provides a huge amount of very practical advice. The Buddha gave advice to kings. He gave advice on diet and health. He gave advice on marriages, on business, on making money, on leaving inheritance to your children, on raising children, being a good employee, being a good boss. The Buddha gave huge amounts of very conventional, practical, helpful advice. We just don't ever study that advice. You know? And then furthermore, when you start thinking about how these concepts might be applied in real life, I sometimes say this, and I don't know if it goes over people's heads or what, but think about this for a second. Great Zen practitioners who were also martial artists in Japan, they didn't just walk onto the battlefield and get murdered, right? They walked on the battlefield and they were swordsmen, or they were archers, or they were... Right? So actually, even to the extreme, even to the very edge of human existence, Buddhism has extremely practical tools for dealing with the real stuff that comes up in real life. The trouble is that the way that it's taught oftentimes isn't like that. It's taught the way that it might be taught to monks and nuns, which is totally valid, but a little different than you would talk about it if you're talking about training someone in real life, right? If you're going to be living in the real world, the advice you need is a little bit different. And the Buddha has advice for both people who are living basically in permanent retreat and people who are living in the real world. But we very rarely hear this other category of advice. Undress says that metta seems a bit cringe too. Right. Okay. So metta is an interesting, very, very interesting and difficult concept. So, hey, Purple, welcome. So think about it like this, okay? Think about someone you really care about. And imagine if you have this person in mind, maybe a really good friend or a parent or a sibling, someone you feel very close to that you legitimately want things to go well for them. Imagine their life took a left-hand turn and they were really getting screwed. You know, they lost their job for a reason that didn't make sense. Then they ended up on the street, right? Don't you automatically feel, wow, I'm going to do whatever I can to help my friend. You know, if they need to crash on my couch for a bit, if I have some money I can give them, I'll give them some money if that helps. whatever they need, I'm gonna try to work things out for my friend here, right? Genuine concern for others is an incredibly powerful force. It's not this like limp-wristed, weak, oh, I hope everyone's okay. That's nothing. If your loving kindness, so called, only extends to puppies and people that are nice to you, that's not loving kindness. And it is really cringe. And it has nothing to do with being nice to everybody. It means that you're willing to do whatever you can to help people when it actually helps. And there's nothing cringe about that. There's something pretty hardcore and worth doing about that. You're taking personal responsibility as best you can, to the degree you can, for the benefit of all beings everywhere, within your level of capability, and so on and so forth. And when you look at people who have developed this state of mind, it is extreme determination on their part. They accomplish oftentimes unbelievable difficult practices, and they accomplish unbelievable benefit in the real world, opening charities, all sorts of things in a very practical, ordinary sense. So, again, the way that it's very often taught is basically in the modern world is taught as goodwill. Oh, I hope everyone has nice stuff, and I hope there's no war, and I hope there's no this, and I hope there's no that. That's goodwill. That's not metta. Metta is not that. That could help you develop metta, but that's not what metta is. It's not just, I hope things turn out nicely for people. It is taking deep to your bones responsibility, to the best of your ability, making yourself available, being completely willing to whatever capacity you can bring about the causes of happiness and happiness for other beings. And if you can bring about their temporary welfare in the meantime, fine. But you wouldn't do that to the detriment of their long-term welfare. Okay. Maybe said enough about that for now. Let's see. Don't forget to laugh at yourself. Yes, laughing at yourself can be good. Okay. So Antonio asks, does one need to train everything in a day or spread it out? I had a funny conversation with a colleague who's a longtime practitioner about that very issue, where he said, if somebody said, hey, I would just like you to practice everything you've ever learned each day, you would just laugh at them because it's impossible. It's completely impossible. At some point, so much stuff and so many techniques and so many antidotes and so many things, you couldn't do them all in one day. So what you do is you get better and better at understanding what it is you actually need to do at a particular time. So if your anger is becoming a big problem this week because of what's actually happening in your life, then work on the antidote to anger. If your mind is becoming extremely distracted and is not behaving and you can't get to your cushion, maybe you need to work on determination. Maybe you need to work on your motivation. Maybe you need to take a break. That might also be a possibility. But no, you can't do everything all at once. You can't do everything all the time. You have to work with yourself where you are from day to day. And then occasionally you do more intense practice, from time to time. You do more intense practice to deepen things and make them more powerful. Messiah says Buddha has lots of advice that's normal and boring. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem, really. This is actually a much more. Hey, Jay, welcome. This is actually a much more profound point than you might think. A lot of the advice is ridiculously simple and easy. And because of this, nobody does it, which is really remarkable. I'll give you an example that's tangential. I was talking with, I won't say who because I don't like to drag people into things, but I was talking to an internal martial arts guy who is extremely well known, extremely capable. I've had the pleasure of getting to train with him in real life, and he is as incredible as he looks online when he's doing things. And we had this conversation where I said, you know, there's this exercise that my teacher here gave me, and it's very simple. And I said, this is the exercise. This simple little breathing thing is the exercise that allows you to do all that weird stuff you do that people think is so impressive. And he goes, yeah. And I go, and it only takes like a couple of years of doing this exercise, like an hour or two a day to gain those skills. And he goes, yeah. And I said, then why doesn't every single person on earth have these capabilities? He goes, because no one will do it. He said, even my senior students won't do it. So this is a common problem. This is a common problem that for some reason, if it's simple and it makes sense and it doesn't sound holy enough, that people won't do it. It's very strange. It's very strange. Because in reality, I've said this before, I'll say it a million times again. Right now, here today, if I could give you the technique and you could generate a non-dual experience of vision, of just seeing what it's like to see, not even mentally or whatever, right? Not some weird thing, just actually seeing with your eyeballs. If you could generate a non-dual experience of vision, which, by the way, you could probably do if you trained with me for 6 months or a year and you did it full on. If you could generate that experience, you would probably never be the same ever again the rest of your life. And the techniques to do it are not that complicated. They don't actually take that much time out of your day. You know, probably if you were doing 30 minutes a day or so, you could be generating like really profound experiences for you, at least, right? Very profound experiences. They're still at the beginning, but they're very profound in terms of personal transformation, very profound experiences. But the trouble is no one, not no one, but hardly anyone will actually do the stuff that makes the things happen. You know, they'll do 5 minutes of practice for a few months and then they stop. And then they'll do 15 minutes for a while, then they stop. And then they do this and they do that. And then nothing happens. Or it takes 5 years to happen instead of taking 6 months. So this is a really important point. Most of the profoundness doesn't sound holy and out of the ordinary and absolutely otherworldly. Most of the holiness is like hard, logical, observational truth, or simple exercises repeated hundreds of thousands of times that refine a specific capability. This is what leads to capabilities that are extraordinary. Okay. Yeah, I've seen from Stoics actually, if responding to Barack's question statement here about Stoicism, I've seen from Stoics. Basically, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think because of the different empirical limits that Stoics and Buddhists place on their inquiry into truth, let's say, that ultimately they wouldn't be able to agree, right? They wouldn't be able to come to a conclusion about what it is a person should do that both sides would agree on. That the Buddhists just have radically different empirical limits. Okay. Purple guy. If there's no self in the way we tend to think of it, how does some essential element transmigrate from life to life? Is the next iteration just some remote element of me that I won't experience? Good question. Good question. Good question. In brief, if we're taking the view of the everything but the final school, the Madhyamaka school, if we're taking the view of every school besides the Madhyamaka school, roughly speaking, very roughly speaking, what transmigrates from life to life is your mind stream. It's one of your aggregates. The subtlest aspect of your mind is what is transmigrating from life to life. Along with it is carried karma, which, if we translate it into English, just means action. The stuff you did leaves imprints or residue or seeds in that subtlest aspect of your mind, not up here at the conscious level of your human experience, but at the subtlest level of your mind. And those then have the potential to drive you towards certain experiences or generate certain experiences physically and mentally in the future. So that's what moves from life to life, is let's say the residue of your actions and your subtlest mind. And from a tantric point of view, also the subtlest sort of physical substances that come along with that subtlest mind. So I actually think this is an important point, that Buddhism puts forward, at least at the level of the Tantras, in my estimation, puts forward a neutral monism and not a substance dualism for the philosophers in the room. And since it's a neutral monism, even though mind and material reality are different substances at the level of our experience currently, at a subtler level, it's a neutral monism, and therefore we don't have to solve the mind-body problem in the same way as a true substance dualist. Right, so that's what goes from life to life. Will the next iteration be some remote element that I won't experience? It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question, but think about it like this. When the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree, he said the first thing that happened to him during his enlightenment was this. He said, I recalled all my past lives. First, I can't remember the number, but I think it was 100, then 1,000, then 10,000, 100,000, and so on, infinitely into the past. Infinite eons of cosmic expansion and contraction. Again and again and again and again and again. An infinite, beginningless past lives in a causal sequence without a beginning. That's the first thing that occurred to him. Bang! He saw this chain of causal events. And through that chain of causal events, there was enough of whatever it is that makes us what we are that the Buddha looked at it and said, I was reborn. And not only was I reborn, he said, I remembered my name, down to the things that I ate, right? So the memories of past lives, and there are modern meditators and other people who've had near-death experiences and things who report similar things, that when your mind gets a bit more subtle, that it's like this. But said that he remembers all the details of these lives. His lives, according to him, my lives in the past. So there's enough, obviously, connection between them that if you recall them, you will go, that's my life from the past. Right? You don't go, oh, that's some other life unrelated to me. So without getting into all the philosophical elements, I think it's important to have that little nugget of information somewhere in your mind, that sort of gold nugget that, okay, when the Buddha talks about his past lives, he talks about them as his. Not only that, when the Buddha talks about other people's past lives, like Ananda or Maudgal Yayana or Shariputra or his his wife or his son or his father or his mother, when he talks about their past lives and recalling their past lives, he says, in that life, this person was in the current life, this is my mother. In the past life, that person I was describing is the same mind stream as my mother, right? Or is the same mind stream as Ananda, etc. So when the Buddha is talking about other people's past lives, he says, yeah, this person was this in a previous life. So again, I don't think it's problematic in any way for as a Buddhist to say you are reborn. What do we mean by that? We mean that a causal sequence of mental events, along with actions and the residues of actions, is moving along through time and doing things. What's not there is the way that you tend to see the self. There's a way that you tend to see the self, and that way of seeing, that being that seems to be there when you're seeing in that way, that one is not there. Right? Okay, let's see. We're not separated from the whole. We are separated from the whole. We're not separated from the whole. See, this is a very interesting point. Buddhism is not saying that there's a oneness. I would challenge anyone here, find me a sutra or a sutta or a commentary that's before like 1950 where someone is saying that there is a universal wholeness that makes up what everything is. You certainly won't find that in the mouth of the Buddha, and you certainly won't find it in the mouths of the earliest commentators. And I haven't seen it in the Indian commentaries. I may have seen it in some of the, like, I don't know, 16th or 17th century Japanese commentaries on stuff. But even the Chinese commentaries and earlier stuff, it's not there either before Zen gets to Japan. So there is no idea really that there is like a universal wholeness of which we are a part, of which we all belong. In that idea isn't there. What is there is that there's an interdependent set of relationships. Now, to have relationships, you need things that aren't the same thing, don't you? A thing can't be in relationship with itself. My hand is my hand. It's not in a relationship with my hand. It's my hand. So unless I think you understand the point. Right? Buddhism is actually not saying that there's no how to put it. Buddhism's not saying that there's a holism, a whole that makes up everything, and everything is just a part of that whole, and that the final realization is, oh, actually, all the time you were the whole. No, that's not a part of Buddhism at all. There are ideas like that in some Hindu schools, but that's not a Buddhist thing at all. Okay, let's see. If even Buddha didn't choose continuous rebirth to help sentient beings, why do Mahayanists endorse the Bodhisattva ideal? The Buddha did endorse continuous rebirth to help sentient beings. But I don't know that I mean it in the way that you mean it. A bodhisattva beyond the 8th level is not in samsara anymore. They are appearing to other beings to benefit them. They're not taking rebirth under the force of karma and delusion and ignorance. They're taking rebirth and emanating, appearing deliberately to benefit others. So that's quite different than saying, oh, they're just taking rebirth forever or something. A Buddha is already in nirvana. A Buddha is in non-abiding nirvana. A bodhisattva on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 9th level, I believe, is in non-abiding nirvana also. So they're not just sort of like, they're not like hanging out, waiting and not attaining nirvana. That would be crazy. That'd be like trying to pull someone out of quicksand while you are completely immersed in quicksand. You can't do it. Okay. It dulls my enthusiasm. It feels like I'm biting off more than you can chew. So all you have to do is continue to increase your good qualities and to reduce your negative qualities. That's it. That's the whole job. If you do that, it's very chewable. You know, you can take a bite. You go, okay, anger is a big problem today. I'm going to work on anger a bit. Okay, I need to work on building this quality so that this happens and that happens. Okay, no problem. So then today, what I need to do is 30 minutes of this. No problem. That's it. If you do that and you keep your vows, then you're headed the right way. That's all you have to do. It's not some. There's no way to do everything at once. There's nothing in life that is meaningful to any significant degree that doesn't require you doing a few things, right? And you can't do them all at once. You can't get your high school diploma all at once. You can't get your bachelor's degree all at once. You can't get your master's degree all at once. You can't get your PhD all at once. You can't write a book all at once. Even if you use ChatGPT, it's going to cause you big problems. You still have to put some work into it. There's nothing in life that's of great meaning that you can do all at once. So you just have to be mature about it and go, okay, yeah, this is going to take time. It's going to be difficult. There's some things I'm not going to want to do, some things I will want to do, like anything else in life. And then you just, as you said, you don't totally stuff your mouth. You take a bite you can actually chew and you work on that bite. And that's more than enough, because 99.99% of people aren't even doing that. Okay. Messiah thinks nirvana doesn't exist. No problem. I hate to say this might not be the right stream for you if you think nirvana isn't real, but c'est la vie. I think compassion's tougher to cultivate than in times past because we live in a hyper-competitive system. Just in general, purple guy, compassion, loving kindness, no, let me start at the beginning. Equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, special intention, bodhicitta, much more difficult to generate even than a correct, direct insight into emptiness. According to the great saints, to generate direct insight into emptiness is easier than generating these minds. These minds are very difficult, very rare. So if you're having trouble cultivating equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, special intention, bodhicitta, you're not alone. It's because it's hard to do. So, you know, I know somebody who spent 4 years working on equanimity, the first step before you develop loving kindness. Just equanimity. 4 years. So it's not an easy thing to do. And so that's okay. You know, you don't, not everything has to be easy. It's pretty easy to do goodwill practices. It's pretty easy to do those. You can do metta practice where it's just goodwill practice any day of the week. And that's a good thing to do. It feels nice. It's good karma. It maybe helps a little bit when you're trying to generate loving kindness, like actual loving kindness at some point. And then, yeah, you just work on it little bit by little bit. As I was saying before, you take off a bite you can actually chew, and you chew the bite. Raising my hand as a stopper. Right. Since we have some new people in the stream, let me say this. So I do all the Q&As for free. I do the meditation class for free here on YouTube. I create the content for free, and I don't have any ads. However, in order to do all this for free, I do have to have donations from the community. So I do this as a full-time job. I make phone calls and talk to people for sometimes hours a day. I do these Q&As. I teach the meditation class, and I make the content. To do all of that and have it available for free for everyone, I do have to have donations from the community to carry on with the work. So if you're getting value from this, please do chip in. Use one of the links down below, or one of the moderators can put it in the chat. Another great way to support the channel is you could join the 18 Lohan Palm course. So that's a whole physical cultivation system, including Chinese health arts, etc., etc. But my meditation material is baked into that course. And then the 5 foundations group, the 5 foundations material, that is just the 5 things I was talking about earlier on the stream: intensive breath meditation, standing, walking, Mahamudra, rumination. So these are the skills that I teach that are relatively secular, but they're a foundation on which you could build any kind of meditative practice or any kind of spiritual practice and go quite a good distance, let's say, uh, through those practices. Okay. So since the moderator can't get to it, let me just pop that into the chat if I can. Right. So these are good ways to chip in. And then if you wanted to hop into the school course, you could do that here. So that's my meditation course. That's a great way to support me. And not only that, but then you'd have a community to train with, because I'm building a community with school. And then that Lohan Palm, like I said, it's a cultivation system related to training and meditation. So it has something like yoga in it called Doyen. It has Qigong. It has Neigong. And it has a Chinese internal martial art in it as well. So it's a complete system. Hundreds of layers related to making the body and energy system perfect for training and meditation. Okay. So please do chip in as much as you can. If you chip in a fair amount, if you're able to chip in a fair amount by donation or by joining one of the courses, that allows me to do this for free for everybody else. So please do chip in if you can. Okay. Right. Carrying on with the chat. Okay. Amity Nosida 96. I bought a high class Tantra. Wasn't thinking about reading or practicing, though I felt bad after. A very trusted friend said I offended Lord Yamataka and basically cursed. Am I in danger? It would be good if you have taken commitment in highest yoga tantra. The vows, in my understanding, you can't give back, but you could, if there was a sadhana commitment that came with that, you could go back to the teacher and say, can you please release me from the sadhana commitment because I can't keep it? And that would be a very good thing to do, because every day you don't do it where you had promised to do it is a new negative karma of not keeping your commitment to your guru. And then as for the rest of it, in terms of your, I think minimum, probably they're still going to want you to do 6-session guru yoga, which is important to do. It takes 5 minutes if you just verbally recite it. There's another even shorter one that only takes 2 minutes. If you want a link to it, I'll send it to you. Very, very easy to do. To keep that commitment, just recite this 5-line or whatever it is, 4-line prayer 6 times, in one session. Very easy. Because I think once you've taken the vows for Tantra and the Bodhisattva vows, I don't think you can give them back. So the way that you keep from breaking them over and over again is you, in your heart, you feel that, okay, I know I can't keep them now, but I'd like to be able to keep them in the future. Oh, okay. Welcome, Christine. Okay, okay. So just buying the scripture is no problem. If take good care of it, have it in a high place in your altar. The top row here is, ooh, it's all backwards. Can I do it? Can I do it? Maybe. Okay, there we are. So the top row here, this is where you would keep your tantric texts and things related to tantra, would be near the top of your shelf. And then topics of descending priority, they can get pretty specific about this stuff, but do your best. If it seems like it's the most profound, most secret, most this and that, then put it at the top. And if it's like really important, put it below that. And if it's sort of a tangential thing, put it below that, and so on and so forth. That's, roughly speaking, a good thing to do. But no, just owning the text is no problem. What you don't want to do is, if you haven't taken the vows, you haven't taken the commitments, you haven't gotten the permission to do the practice, and you don't have the instructions, more importantly, because the instructions in these texts for these things, they're deliberately incomplete. They rely on the lineage telling you, oh, by the way, when you do this part of the sadhana, you do it like this. And then these three things happen, and then you do that. And it's not written down anywhere. Why not? Because if somebody gets the text, they cannot be allowed to know how it works by reading the book. You have to get it through the lineage. Why? Because you can break yourself pretty badly by doing these practices wrong, is the most important reason. Okay, I digress. Anyways, yeah, just take good care of the text. It's good. It's actually good to have the text with you and to make offerings to it and to treat it respectfully, put it on the top of your head, all of this. These are good things to do, Okay. Let's see what is next. Jesus proclaims himself to be the Son of God and the way to the Father. Oh, yeah, you asked this before. Right. So there's an interesting passage. Welcome, Satya. So there's an interesting passage in the Buddhist canon where the Buddha talks about how the view that a creator God enters the world. And he describes this whole process where a deity wakes up as the first deity, at least as far as they can see, because there are formless deities and so forth, but the first Brahma, the most powerful Brahma, wakes up in a new universe before any other beings have woken up in that universe, at the beginning of a new universe. And they have no memory of anything except for this universe and themselves existing. And they think, I'm the first, I'm the last, I'm eternal, I'm all powerful, I'm all knowing. And whatever I decide is what occurs. And then they say, but let there be other beings. Bang. And because of the karma of other beings from the past, with that particular deity, who is now a deity, right? There are some beings who are reborn in their heavenly realm under the force of that karma in combination with the will of that being. Bang. They take rebirth in that realm. After some period of time, they also say, oh, look at this great Brahma. He's eternal. He's great. He's omniscient. He's this. He's that. And then one of them dies and is reborn in the human realm. And when that being dies and is reborn in the human realm, he says, roughly speaking, right, says, my Father in heaven is eternal. He's omniscient. He's all powerful. He's this. He's that. He's the beginning. He's the end. And then once again, that being dies and goes back into heaven, right? So I made a video on this. There's a video somewhere in Buddhist PhD Responds where I talk about this. Yeah, I mean, the Buddha was very much aware that there would be cases where deities thought that they were eternal, thought they were creators of the universe, and that other beings would come to believe and think that that was the case. However, um, the Buddha also gave instructions for people who would like to be reborn in the Brahma realms. He gave instructions for people who would like to be reborn as heavenly beings. So it is possible through your connection with certain heavenly beings, your desire and aspiration to take rebirth in a particular heaven after death, and so on and so forth, and your virtue, your good karma, it's possible to take rebirth in those kinds of heavenly realms. Absolutely. So, in an important sense, we don't have to, like, we only have to throw out, sometimes I say it like this, we only have to throw out like 2% of Christianity and we can keep the rest. You can keep the risen Jesus. You can keep all the miracles of healing, walking on water, blah, 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 because all of those are described also in the Buddhist canon. We have examples of things like this in the canon. These are things we say are possible that a person can do with sufficient capability. No problem. And especially a being who's just been reborn from the devil realms with tons of good karma and a natural inclination to samadhi and concentration, of course, yeah, all sorts of miracles might be possible. No problem. I'll give you all of that and still say no thank you. Why? Because we don't want to be reborn in a heavenly realm for the sake of being reborn in a heavenly realm, because it's temporary. And the Christian will say, well, no, we teach it's not temporary. And we would say, yes, I'm sorry, that's part of the 2% that I need to throw away. The rest of it you can have. The rest of it, no problem. Yes, there is a heavenly realm. Yes, there's a highest God who's extremely powerful and creative and knowledgeable in that realm and loving. Yes, some of the beings closely associated with that God who could be called his children were reborn on earth. Yes, they perform miracles. Yes, but no thank you. Why? Because there's like 2% that we say you're getting wrong, even though we would say that probably most of that is true. So again, it's a very, very interesting, if you really think it through. You don't have to give up very much of Christianity as a Buddhist. If you really think through Buddhist cosmology, most of Christianity fits into the Buddhist worldview. In terms of the broad strokes, right? Okay. Okay, Jay says, strange experience. I got into concentration, started feeling like I was no longer me meditating, but like I was in a different body. Okay, so it's important to realize, right? Your mind is generating every single aspect of your experience. Yes, there's an external world. We should be very clear about this. There's an external world, but the only part of it you get to experience is generated by your mind, is generated by your consciousness, including your internal picture of what your body is, what your person consists of. If you train in concentration, all sorts of weird things are going to happen because you're looking at the thing that is creating every single other aspect of your experience, and not just creating it in a way that seems real. It's not unreal, but it's important to note your mind is in the reality creation business. Your mind creates things that are real and appear real, right? So when you start meditating, all sorts of strange things are going to occur to you. They have to, because you're working with the thing that makes other stuff seem real to you. So some of those things will be valid experiences. Some of them will just be weird stuff that your mind does when you turn your attention inwards. Like tapping into the fact that, oh, actually, the entire concept and vision and experience I have of my body as a me is actually just a bunch of mental images that I've smushed together as a thing. Okay, All right. Right? And that if you change that image in the right state of mind, then it looks totally different. Not only that, there's no you in the way you think there is having the meditative experience. And so when that me goes away temporarily from time to time, because you have a non dual experience of some aspect of whatever it is that makes you up as a being, your vision, your smell, your taste, your hearing, touch, your sense of having a body, when the normal sense of who and what you are goes away temporarily and you and the meditative object become like this, right? And the space seems to go away between the two because there isn't a space between the two. That normal sense of I goes away. This isn't yet a realization of selflessness, by the way. This is just normal training and concentration. The sense of self is actually below that. Okay. So, yeah, all sorts of weird stuff's going to happen. Is it a valid experience? Don't know. Will it happen again? Maybe, maybe not. All sorts of weird stuff is going to happen to you. If you keep training, weirder and weirder and weirder things will happen. Which is why you need a lineage to tell you that one's important, that weird one, that one's important. Those 10 over there, not important. Don't chase those. If you chase those, you may not end up in a good place, or you'll just stop practicing. Okay, bad Doge. Bad Doge. So, no. So, there is no original source. This is the point. An infinite causal sequence has no first anything. If we go back 50 billion trillion moments in time, there's still an infinite number more behind that. There's not a first one where they all come from somewhere. There is no one somewhere they all came from. That's a category that doesn't exist. So what exists is an infinite number, according to Buddhism. Maybe depends on who you ask, either infinite or uncountable, which are not necessarily the same thing, right? But infinite or uncountable number of mind streams, and those mind streams are ticking along in a causal fashion. And if you rewind the tape, right, you're watching the movie forwards, and then you go, well, where does this start? And you rewind the tape, you find out that the tape never stops spinning. There's no first moment of anything. Time goes back infinitely into the past. This universe has a beginning, but right before this universe is other stuff, including the minds of sentient beings whose karma is bringing this universe into existence. So time, in terms of physics, of course, begins at the Big Bang. We're very much aware of this. But time, in terms of moment by moment change, momentariness, isn't dependent upon the existence of the physical universe. So time, in that grander sense, carries on without a beginning. So there's no same source, there's no one source, there's no oneness, there's no ultimate unity of all things in one thing. That would be something like Brahma, right? Brahma is the underlying principle or creative aspect of all things, to which everything else belongs, or out of which everything else comes. There's nothing like that in Buddhism. You have an individual mind stream, and that mind stream is interrelated with other things, but is not unified with other things. This is a key difference between Buddhist thought and, at least my understanding currently, of Hindu thought. Okay. Antonio says, what's the point of seeing non-dualistic vision on command? Okay. So, Luck, welcome. So, non-dual vision on command. If you want to do vipassana into the nature of self, and you want to see for yourself, know for yourself how the self exists, you have to have sufficient concentration that you can get the ordinary biased way of seeing significantly out of the way. So if you can go through hearing non-dual, seeing non-dual, smell non-dual, taste non-dual, touch non-dual, consciousness non-dual, and you can see how each one of these things exists, then you become capable of looking in all of the places that self could be and doing profound analysis and insight into the mode of your being, into the nature of how you exist. So this is a very, very important, very, very important capability. Practically speaking, it also creates a lot of bliss, which can be nice. I mean, if you can generate a non-dual experience of hearing, for example, then almost right away there's bliss running through the center of the body, the arms, the legs, up into the head, and then things feel nice and your mind has energy and you can use it to do things that you want to do. And the mind becomes more flexible because the ordinary way of interacting with auditory experience isn't there. So the ordinary patterns aren't there. And so you can do something different than you would normally do. So it increases your freedom, is a different way of thinking about it. It increases your freedom because the ordinary pattern that would have determined what you did isn't there. Okay. Swami Tadat Mananda says it's impossible to realize non-duality in the Advaita Vedanta tradition. What do I say about realizing non-duality? I tend to say that non-duality is a beginner's experience. I truly, if we're defining a beginner properly, I think non-duality is a beginner's experience. It's not that difficult to generate. If you're training with some heart for a year or two, probably, even if you just do one short retreat in that time, you can generate at least one or two experiences of non-duality with regards to something. Your breath, vision, hearing, touch, something. It's actually not that hard to do. It's just the natural result of concentration. When you concentrate, normally it looks like here's the object over here. Here's the part of my mind that's knowing that object, like my eyes and my visual consciousness are being aware of this image or this object over here. And I'm kind of in between, and I own my visual process, and I'm the one who's seeing that object with my visual process. And if you just generate concentration, they go, and you realize that the visual process is generating the experience of the object and having the experience of the object. And you, the you thought was there, isn't in between anywhere. It's obvious, absolutely obvious. And that's non-duality. It just comes from concentration. Why is it non-dual, not two? Because these aren't two things. We already know this from a cognitive psychological perspective. Your processing power as a being is what, in combination with your senses being stimulated by the world, your processing power is producing this experience and then having the experience. Let me say that again. Your senses get stimulated through the processing power of your mind. It generates an experience using that stimulated condition, and then you experience what it has generated. So the mind generating the experience and the mind having the experience are one entity. They're not one thing, because you can actually get rid of one and your mind doesn't go out of existence, right? But they aren't two things. If you get rid of this aspect, the object being known, then this particular mind that is knowing and generating that mind also goes out of existence, because you can't pull them apart. And there's no you in the middle in the way that you thought. This is a relatively beginner's experience. Relatively speaking, you can probably get this 5 days of retreat, 3 days of retreat, even with virtually no experience in meditation. So this is the beginning of something. This is nowhere near the end. So why everyone is so obsessed with non-duality, it kind of cracks me up. Like there are all these, especially like kind of fake guru people and fake teachers all over the internet who are like, oh, non-duality, come get the, and like this is something that you could do in a few days. You know what I mean? It will change your life because it's so profound and profoundly different than you thought, but it is absolutely way over here at the beginning of something, nowhere near the end. So why everyone spends hours talking about it on the internet, I don't know. It really doesn't make that much sense to me. I mean, it sounds silly, but like with a little bit of training, you should be able to sit here and go non-dual vision. And it just turns on, and then you go, okay, thanks, and you turn it off. And it's just like that. And that's just how it is. And along with it comes some bliss, and it's there, and then the bliss hangs out for a bit, even after you stop doing it. No problem. This is like a basic capability you need to have to do other stuff as a meditator. This is not some advanced, unbelievable, magical thing. Okay, I digress. Okay. Bad Doge. Yeah, it is easy to fall into the read another book trap. On that point, I go back and forth. I mostly don't recommend books anymore unless people ask, and I think, okay, this person could really be helped by a book. Most of the time, I don't recommend books anymore because if you really want to learn any of these things, probably you need to study a book with a teacher in a lineage that has the oral tradition that goes along with that book. The herd tradition that goes along with that text. Because that text isn't just a bunch of lines on a page. That text was very likely written in a living training circumstance that was never broken from the time it was written until now. And part of the meaning of that text is an unbroken series of transmissions of that text and teaching of that text from the time it was written and the person who wrote it to right now. And the meaning is contained not in the book. It's contained in this. This is where the meaning is. It's not over here in the book. It's in the oral tradition, passed down from teacher to student, using the book as a reference point, as something to help with the process. This is why lineage is so important. This is why I also laugh a little bit when people say, oh yeah, I've been training for 40 years, but I have no lineage. And you go, okay, no problem. No problem. You know? If you're not training with human beings, it's very difficult to make progress because the real meaning of stuff isn't in the book. It's in the oral tradition and the teachings that come along with the book. So the books are very important, but what makes the books sort of work, in a sense, is having somebody who can walk you through all the different angles of each aspect and define the critical terms as you come to them and point things out that aren't obvious from the way that it's written. And then furthermore, having a map is very different from knowing the terrain. The map isn't the terrain. So when you're looking at the terrain and you're looking at the map, sometimes it's not clear whether the cliff is the thing you're looking at right over there or if it's like 20 miles down the road or somewhere over there. Somebody who's walked down the path 40 times already and walked there and back a bunch of times with other people because they've been teaching for years goes, yeah, that is the cliff there. Be careful. Right? And not to use Jay, hopefully he won't mind, as an example, but somebody comes to you and goes, oh, I had this experience where my body wasn't my body and blah blah blah, and you go, yeah, lots of weird stuff will happen in meditation. Don't chase that. That's a cliff. Just keep doing your practice. If you chase that, it doesn't lead anywhere, and it's going to slow you down. And if you really chase it hard, it'll take you places you don't want to go. Do you understand? And you won't get that advice in a book that I recommend all the time, Calming the Mind. You won't get that advice in that book. And you certainly won't get it at the time you need it when those experiences are happening. That comes through lineage. Training with somebody that has been training a long time and has the oral tradition from at least one other tradition. Right. Okay. Yes, I have to agree. If you're hearing voices in your head and you're not sure if they're real or not, probably the thing to do is talk to a psychologist, not do more meditation practice. In fact, there's a fair amount of literature on this sort of thing in the Western discipline now. It's actually fairly well known that if you don't have a lineage of secular practice, let's say, or religious practice, that you're training in meditation in that lineage, in that with people that are experts, basically, that the chance, if you do a lot of meditation, the chance that something's going to go wrong and you're going to screw yourself up is actually pretty high. So it's pretty important that if you're doing stuff in meditation and stuff is happening and it's weird and it's interesting and it's compelling and blah blah blah, it's important that you have people, once again, to go to the lineage thing, you have experts you can go to and say, hey, these 4 deities appeared to me and they said this and I did these things, and when they told me to do these things I actually tried them, and when I did them they actually worked. And they go, yeah, that could be real, could be fake, it worked, okay, that's good, okay, carry on with your practice, maybe it'll happen again, maybe it won't, don't worry about it. Okay. Because you could have fallen off a big cliff there and chased experiences of trying to experience more deity things. Or you could have thought, oh, I'm a really special person now because these deities appeared to me and told me to do something and I did it. And then it really worked, which means I must be really special now. Maybe I'm a prophet. Maybe I'm a guru. Maybe I'm... That was a cliff. Your teacher just pointed the other way. You understand? So it's pretty important that if you're going to train in meditation seriously, that you have good teachers, good lineage. Okay. Don't add to the madness. Couldn't agree more. Okay. Christine found a Buddhist calendar online that listed Guanyin's enlightenment as the 31st of July. Haven't come across much information about it. So I don't do much of anything really with the Chinese Buddhist calendar, which would be Guanyin. Although I think Japan, they also have Guanyin. In any case, this might sound a bit funny, but one of my teachers recommended that rather than taking all of the Buddhist holidays on board, that you take the holidays you already celebrate in your culture and you turn those into holidays related to your practice. So Thanksgiving is rejoicing, Christmas is generosity, and so on and so forth. And like this, you take the holidays that are already there, that your mind puts a huge amount of emphasis, a huge amount of importance on, and you use those to cultivate certain things throughout the year. So this was the advice one of my teachers gave me, because the special force of certain days in part has to do with the fact that for years you have believed this is a special day. Part of it has to do with the day, I'm sure, but part of it has to do with the fact that your mind treats that day in a particular way. So, yeah, it's good. If you want to observe any of these Buddhist holidays and do special things, awesome. I do it from time to time, but mainly I take the standard ones from the culture I was born in and use those to do special things. Okay, very brief commercial break. Once again, for those of you who are new, I do these Q&As for free, and I have the meditation class running Monday, Wednesday, Friday for free. I make the content for free, at least at this time, with no ads. I'd like to keep ads off all the content. So if you're getting something valuable out of this and you'd like it to carry on, I do this as a full-time job. I make phone calls talking to people and helping them with their practice, and teach and do retreats for people. And this is all I do. So if you'd like this to carry on, I do need a certain amount of support from the community. You can chip in down below using the links for PayPal, Venmo. That would be the best way. Or you could chip in through joining one of the courses. So there are 2 courses. The first is the 5 Foundations. All of that information is already for free on YouTube, but the school course has a whole community that will be supporting you in your practice, in addition to just the videos, which I have on YouTube. And in the long run, the school community, when I get to about 100 people, we're going to start sponsoring people to go into retreats. And those retreats would need to meet certain qualifications, and you need to be in the community for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. But the idea is that we would be able to send all of the members of the community that want to go into retreat over a 3-4 year period, that each of us could go into retreat for a longer time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, sponsored by the community. So if it was going to cost you $800, if there's 100 of us, we all chip in $8 and you get to go into retreat for a month, right? So that's what I'm building with the school course. People that want to do my practices, support the community I'm building, and be part of that idea. And then there's Lohan, the 18 Lohan Palm course. I helped Neil Ripsky build it, and 18 Lohan is a Southern Shaolin system that is a complete cultivation system. So it has Doyen, which is a bit like Hindu yoga. So that's sort of your stretching and pulling exercises. It has pranayama practices of all kinds. It has what's called muscle tendon changing and bone marrow washing, which are really powerful kinds of qigongs. And then it has qigong, neigong, etc., etc. It is a complete system that includes physical discipline, energetic training, and meditation as one system. So I'm working with him. My techniques are baked into his course. But if you like Tai Chi, for example, then you'd like 18 Lohan Palm, because it's an internal martial art, but it also has a complete cultivation system as part of the system. Can't recommend it highly enough. I do those practices myself and have done them for years through another teacher. Very, very similar practices, and they really, really help with your meditation training, making the body comfortable for meditation and so forth. So that's a great way to support me. Final note on that, then we'll be back to questions. If you want to hang out with me in real life at some point and do some retreat with me, probably it'll be through the Lohan community. So Neil and I are going to do joint retreats where he teaches Lohan and I teach meditation mainly. And that'll probably start next year, maybe February or March. And the first retreat will probably be in Europe, we're thinking, where it's a little bit less expensive than the UK. And yeah, so if you want to hang out and do some retreat, join the Lohan crew, and then you can train in my meditation techniques, train in some Lohan, and eventually we can do some retreats in person together. Okay? So those are all great ways to support what I'm doing here. and that'll allow me to carry on for at least one more month, right? Okay. Right. Let's see. Buddhism originated in the Indian subcontinent, still practiced there. How different is Buddhism elsewhere than in the Indian subcontinent? So, quite interesting, Satya. I'm sorry it took me so long to get the thing about Buddhism in India is that it was one of the primary religions, and for a period of time the primary religion in, let's say, certain parts of India for an extended period of time, from maybe the 3rd century until about the 13th century or 12th century, at which time an invading army basically wiped it out. And Buddhism, as far as I understand, on the Indian subcontinent went out of existence for something like 700 years. And then in the last 100 years, has started from other places to move back into India. So you've had Cambodian, Burmese, Thai forest, Tibetan, Mongolian, Nepalese, Bhutanese. Buddhism starting to migrate back into India. So, basically, I don't think that there's any, let's call it, original Indian Buddhism left. I think it got wiped out. The closest that we have to original Indian Buddhism would be, I think, probably Tibetan Buddhism. Because at the height of Indian Buddhism in the 7th, 8th century, and then again in the 9th or 10th century, so right before it went out of existence in India, there were 2 major transmissions of Buddhism to Tibet. And then Tibet maintained those transmissions up to the modern day, and now we're having them retransmitted back into India and to the rest of the world by way of the Tibetan diaspora. So, of course, there's going to be Buddhism, very, very good streams of Buddhism all over the place. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but in terms of if you want to get sort of what the flavor of high Indian Buddhism would have been like, I think the closest thing we have to that today is going to be coming through a number of the Tibetan lineages. Earlier transmissions of Buddhism left India and went into China, and then went into Japan, and then went into Korea and Vietnam, and in the form of Zen or Chan practice, right? And so we have that whole stream that left earlier and has its own developmental stages. And same thing, relatively earlier significantly earlier in the process, Buddhism moved out into other parts of Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, blah, 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 and became what we have today in terms of Theravadan practice, mainly Theravadan practice. So I'm not a great historian, so I may be making some things too general or whatever, but broadly speaking, if you were interested in the what did Indian Buddhism look like before it got wiped out, I think the closest we have to that today would be Tibetan, Mongolian, Bhutanese, that whole stream, right, where Buddhism left and moved out into those areas and then got wiped out in India. So yeah, the Buddhist never said, don't take my word for it, go find out for yourself. He did say, come and see. He did say, come do what I'm telling you and see if it does what I told you it does, which is a little bit different. It's not like just go do whatever and find out, because that doesn't lead to where the Buddha is leading people. The Buddha said, come and see, come and see. Thank you, Sammy. Appreciate that. So I will say this, since that came through. If you guys would like to make donations, the very best place to do it, Venmo or PayPal. If Sammy, again, very much appreciate you sending a donation through. However, YouTube will take 30%. And if you sent it on an iPhone, then Apple will take another 30%, which means that out of $5, only two of them will actually arrive to me. which I think probably is not what you intended, right? I would imagine. uh, so if you were hoping and desiring that more of it would end up actually arriving to me and supporting the mission, definitely send any larger donations and so forth. I would say even if it's only $5 or what have you, just send it through. Just send it through PayPal, Venmo. One of those sources is much better. Okay. And you can hit pause on the stream, by the way. You can hit pause on the stream and then go back, uh, and carry on from there after you donate. All right. So why does it feel like Vedic is how younger people see the world and Buddhism's how older souls see the world? I'm not sure. I think Vedic traditions they're pretty interesting. They're pretty profound, complicated. There's a huge amount of detail and difference and debate in the Vedic traditions. It's very rich because it doesn't have a break, right? It doesn't have any breaks. So it's a continuous tradition that's gone on for an extremely long period of time. And they've just had an unbelievable number of internal and external debates. So, yeah, I don't know that I would agree with that assessment. I think it's quite interesting, worth looking at, worth thinking about if you have the time to do that in addition to everything else. Okay, if you ever get stressed out because of voices or just feelings in general, there's no harm in letting someone know. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Okay, if you want to know more about the ego, I recommend reading up on Tulpa. Okay. Discipline. A lot of comments, not as many questions. Yeah, so Antonio, I would, yeah. Um, I would definitely, if you're interested in this stuff, the best thing to do is find a community. Find a community, because if you want to learn about all of the technical vocabulary, all the details, all the stuff that actually makes the meditation work, that's going to come through a lineage. And then also just spending time around people who are really accomplished in a particular lineage, who have been doing it for many, many years. It's different than reading a book about it. Standing in the presence of somebody and, for 500,000 years, our species has learned a lot before developing language by just looking at other animals, looking at other beings, and having to read them and get information about, okay, does he want to eat me? Does he want to kill me? Does he want to give me something? So there's just hundreds of thousands of communications that come non-verbally. They come through character, they come through movement, they come through being there. It's not just the words, although those are important. It's being in the presence of people that are accomplished and feeling what that's like. It gives you something more than just reading the critical commentary on it or doing the practice. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I've talked to a number of practitioners about this, and talked to one of my teachers about it recently. We were talking about the fact that it's don't know why. Well, I mean, there are explanations, of course, in the canon, but in one of the canons about when you're with your teachers, sometimes it's easier to do the practices. It's really interesting. When you're with your teachers, your other people, and other people trying to do a particular practice, sometimes there's more progress. It was really, really interesting. For no other reason than you happen to be there with someone who's accomplished in it, and you're around other people who are trying to do it, more happens. If I am putting on my modern education hat, I might say, well, you have mirror neurons, and your brain mirrors the internal state of other people and tries to understand the internal state of other people, and being around a whole bunch of other people that are doing something allows you to do it more easily, because there's basically more of that is available to you through your perception than would have been by reading a book or whatever, right? Maybe. maybe maybe, right? There could be more to it than this. So, like this, uh very, 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 very important, I would say, to have, at least from time to time, once a week, once every couple weeks, something to spend some time around other practitioners that are quite capable. If there's someone around who's done a lot of retreat, spending time with a person like this, very important from time to time. It'll change your practice. And then when you study, right? When you study a book, when you're studying various texts and so forth, studying it with somebody in a lineage where that extra layer, right? If the book is like dry cake with nothing on it, the oral tradition and the lineage carried from generation to generation, that's the frosting, that's the jam, that's the chocolate drizzle, that's the scoop of ice cream. It's everything else that makes just dry cake into a cake. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that either, Purple Guy. Yeah, maybe the place to go is Mongolia, or Bhutan and Nepal also have transmissions of Indian Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, there's still some very important lineages that, let's say, are not influenced by politics in a certain way. So that's important. Sammy. No, that's plenty. It's plenty to do. The Lohan and the school, and actually Goenka doesn't have a terrible practice culture. They actually train pretty hardcore. I think, in my humble opinion, they need a few more tools to help you bring your practice into real life. And there's another member of the community who does Goenka practice, and at least he tells me that yes, this is true. If you do my stuff and you're doing Goenka, it helps, because my stuff is basically, you're learning how to take what you're getting from your Goenka and bringing it into more and more and more stuff. You're generalizing your capabilities into more and more areas of your life. So this is, again, I mean, Goenka is quite good. I think the only thing that's a bit thingy about Goenka is they're kind of territorial. They don't like people doing multiple things. And if you want to go to the upper echelons of what they do, they require that you not do other things. And I can see why in some aspects that makes sense, but I also know a fair number, well, not know, but have heard of a fair number of people who have left Goenka after a few years for that very reason. that you get to a certain point and it's hard to go higher, and the way that they're arranging the information is maybe not always the best, and you know, and then again, but then again, not every system is not for everyone. So I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on Goenka, but I mean, I think the practice culture of, if you're just looking at do the practices, do them in this order, do enough of them to actually make them work, and we're all going to do it together. I think that's a good thing. Okay. Antonio, don't be worried about anybody reading your mind. Besides the maybe head teachers at places like this, probably not very many people can read your mind. And the head teacher, if he can, has enough samadhi that it won't bother him or her. Okay, what question is important to me? What question would I like you all to ask? That's an interesting question. Very interesting. I don't know. I don't really have a particular question. I like hanging out with all of you. I like answering your questions, whatever they happen to be. Some of them serious, some of them less serious. It's interesting for me too to just hang out with people that are from all over the world, and you've trained in different things, you have different backgrounds, the questions you ask are coming from a lot of different angles. And so, that makes it quite interesting for me as well. It's not just a not just a one-sided thing. In terms of my desires, really, I think what I really want from, I don't know, I guess the community, I might say, is I really hope people do the practices. I really hope people do the practices, get benefit from the practices, and through training hard, that stuff really starts to change. Stuff really starts to happen from doing the practices. And then that they come to me and have questions that show me that they're doing the practice, right? Not that they're coming to me and saying, oh, yeah, everything's amazing now and I have no problems and blah, 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 because that's nonsense. If that's what you think, then you're not training hard enough, or you're doing a lot of stuff that's not working well, because your practice will, generally speaking, will show you that things are not as good as you thought. Okay, good to see you, Doge. Good to see you. So, yeah, I mean, what I enjoy most really are the questions people where people come to me and it's clear from the question that they've been doing the practice and they've really looked at the instructions well and they've done it as well as they can. And a question has come up that is the type of question that comes from really putting the instructions into practice. you know? So that's really, those are the questions I enjoy the most, where I go, this is good. This is a good question, because I know that there's a lot of work behind this question, some study, some thought, practice. You sat on it for a while, you worked with it, and you came with this question. It's a good, that's a good question, Also, sometimes people come to these streams and they ask questions where it's like, I've been thinking about for years this, and it's been bothering me. And I go, yeah. Sometimes, If you have something that's really itching the back of your brain and bothering you about all of this stuff, or the practices, or seeming contradictions between this and that, those questions I like a lot, because usually it's not just one person. Usually there's like a handful of questions that most people have. And very few answers are out there when you look on the internet, and a lot of the answers aren't very good that you find. Okay. Wisdom is mind. Sorry to say I don't believe in Buddhism or Hinduism, because the scriptures are written to control. Well, wisdom, you need to contact every major university in the world and let them know that all of the research they've done on great meditators, including those yogis who have spent 25 or 30,000 or 50,000 hours doing practice that show definitively from their cognitive psychological condition that they are miles ahead of us in terms of happiness, mental control, compassion, etc., etc., etc. You need to tell all these silly scientists who have, put in millions of dollars and hundreds of hours of research into whether or not this stuff is real and found out that it's real. You need to let them know. I mean, they're going to be really disappointed when you tell them that, in your opinion, it's a scam. I mean, my goodness, man. My goodness. We are living at the best time in history to think that all this stuff is real and works, because we have unbelievably good evidence from cognitive science that shows that whether it's, especially for training in concentration, training in compassion, these practices are real and they do things that take you well beyond ordinary human experience. How do we know? Because the cognitive psychological state measurable in a lab of people who have done hundreds of hours of this stuff is radically different than an ordinary person. So their internal condition is dramatically different than an ordinary person. So again, joking aside, this is the best time in history to think that all this stuff is real. You kind of miss the bus to have that opinion. Unfortunately, the time has passed. That opinion can no longer be held by a well-studied, well-educated person. Okay. Why does the canon say that all previous Buddhas were Indian? This is a subtle point. I don't think the canon does say that all the previous Buddhas were Indian. So the thing to consider is that we are human beings, right? We're human beings. Isn't it interesting that the way that Buddhas appear is as human beings when they have all the diagrams and this and that? Isn't that interesting? They don't appear as a cow or an octopus or a space alien, or it's interesting, right? You need to think about this for a while. I mean, why do they all have 5 fingers? Why do they all have 5 toes? Why do they? Is there like some inherent rule in the universe with billions and trillions of unlimited numbers of planets that all beings must have 5 fingers? And a Buddha is a being that has a mind that extends over all of space. And Buddhists teach gods and intelligent beings wherever they are in all of space. Do you think all intelligent beings in the entire universe have 5 fingers and 5 toes? Or do you think that the way that Buddhas appear to us is in a way that benefits us because we're human beings? I mean, according to the canon, Buddhas can appear as literally anything that will benefit you. And bodhisattvas at a certain level, they can also do this. They can appear as absolutely anything that can benefit you as long as you have the karma for them to appear in that way. So, a Buddha can appear as almost anything. Now, where the wheel-turning Buddhas will appear on this planet may be a different issue. I have heard some sources say that the wheel-turning Buddhas for this planet will occur in the greater Himalayan area, and then they attain enlightenment in the same area, and all of them attain enlightenment in that one particular area. That may be true. I don't know. Yeah, it's not something we can confirm or deny from where we're seated. But the broader canon says, especially in the Mahayana, that there are countless Buddhas extending out everywhere, appearing as all sorts of things. And they can even appear as non-Buddhist deities, and they can appear as, whatever is needed to benefit the beings that can be benefited by a Buddha. So in that way, I would say probably your instinct to say this is the benefit of the audience, that's probably headed the right direction. Okay. Gong Show. It's been a while. Good to see you. Sorry, just adjusting my chat to try to get back. Ah. Antonio asks, what do I mean by practice shows them things aren't as good as they seem? Generally speaking, if you do serious practice, generally speaking, it will make it even more clear to you how messed up your ordinary mind is. If your mind seems relatively normal to you from day to day, then you go into retreat and you gain an experience of a subtler layer of your mind that doesn't have the ordinary fluctuations and this and that and distraction, and then you come out of retreat and you see those things starting to happen again. It will be obvious to you how disturbing, unnecessary, dangerous, harmful those things are, and there are hundreds of them and they're happening constantly and you can't control them. It can be very dark. You know? And so when people come to me and they're like, oh yeah, everything's perfect and it's been perfect the last 2 years and there's no problems and blah, 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 I go, okay, what is there to say? Are you an arhat? If you're not an arhat, you should have problems. you know? If you're not an arhat, then you should have problems. If you don't know what they are, that's a problem. Until you've attained nirvana, you should have emotional problems. You should have anger. You should have aversion. You should have jealousy. You should have envy. You should have a certain amount of arrogance, because those are baked into this process of ignorance, klesha, karma, etc., etc., etc. That's what's keeping you bound to a cycle of rebirth. So if you come to me and say, oh yeah, my mind is perfect, I have no problems, my mind is just serene all the time, I'm going to go, okay, good luck, cheers, I mean, what is there to say? Because my experience has been, and my teachers' experiences have been, that the more experience you gain, the more you realize how the surface, in particular, the surface of the mind with its out of control stuff that is almost constant, it's pretty dark. It's a pretty dark situation. It's not actually, and respect, this respectfully, this is coming from somebody that it's not that difficult to do meditation where you can generate some bliss and make the mind calm. It's not that difficult to do that, What's really difficult is overcoming ignorance and delusions. Very difficult. Very difficult to generate new, exceptionally good mental qualities that replace the normal ones that you have from day to day. Very difficult. And so if you don't see that yourself as having any problems whatsoever, that's a problem. That's the first problem that needs to be dealt with. Okay. Okay, when practice becomes a means to attain enlightenment, was craving merely adopted as a sacred form? I'm not sure what you mean, Gongsho. The Buddha said you should train like your hair is on fire. You should have absolutely incredible, overwhelming desire from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head to the tips of your fingers. Completely out of control desire to attain the goal of the practices, according to the Buddha. So none of that is delusional, because if you put the techniques into practice that create the results of the practice, that's not afflictive. That's not a disease of your mind that is hallucinating some result that doesn't exist and chasing it. That's you cultivating a specific desire that leads to a particular end when you put that desire into practice. I mean, this is what the Eightfold Path teaches, right? You have the right view, so you develop a worldview that develops powerful intent. This develops effort. This is a totally ordinary process of working with your psychology. You get the right idea in your head that makes you decide you're going to do stuff. That deciding you're going to do stuff becomes more powerful, right? You get more motivated to do it. And the Buddha says you need to get so motivated to do this that it's like your hair is on fire. So, no, I think it's totally wrong to think that you're making something negative into something holy or something. I think most people need way more desire for this than they have. Okay. The Nobleman. That's a good name. What do you think about jhana? I start by doing Goenka Vipassana, but I found it not so fruitful when I started doing practices that focus the mind, then come and do Vipassana. Comment on this. I'm not 100% clear on the question, but I'll do my best. The idea that you can do dry Vipassana was invented, I think, in the 1960s by one particular lineage of monks, or a monk, actually. And this was passed down through a number of people, including Goenka. So the idea that without shamatha, without samadhi, without jhana, that you can just jump straight into Vipassana and develop your concentration ability through Vipassana until there's enough concentration through having done enough Vipassana that it actually becomes Vipassana instead of being you just trying to do Vipassana, right? And they call this dry Vipassana, Vipassana without shamatha, samadhi, concentration. I think there's some evidence to say that those practices of body scanning and so forth, they're very beneficial. Whether or not they lead to jhana, I don't know that we know that for sure, but they probably can, especially in an intensive environment. And then in terms of actually doing the jhanas, the model that I use when I teach comes from the Bhavana Krama tradition. So it's a little bit different than the jhana model. The jhana model is part of the Tibetan Geluk school, but I haven't studied it in any great detail. I just find the Bhavana Krama model to be more straightforward. It's aimed at accomplishing a certain quality of concentration. Exactly where that falls in the jhana system, maybe the second jhana, maybe the third jhana, maybe the fourth jhana, not 100% sure, but it's definitely not the first one, which still involves focused thought, right? Conceptual thought. It's beyond that for sure. But in terms of the steps and stages that are described for a person who's training in concentration, I find the Bhavana Krama model to be much better, much more straightforward than what I've seen of the jhana training systems. And that's probably just down to me and my preferences, not down to the jhana training systems themselves. I've done a fair amount of seated practices that are intended to create the jhanas. Those are very important practices. If you can't do that, you can't do full-on Vipassana. You need concentration to do Vipassana, according to every source prior to 1960. So, yeah, I would recommend it. I would recommend it very highly. All right. If you could translate that term, Gongsho, papanyacha. If perception is conditioned by past formations, can one ever encounter reality directly? This is an interesting point. So when you look at the debates amongst the Mahayana schools that have epistemological traditions, that have basically cognitive psychological models for how the human mind works, that extend beyond simply talking about how to say the absolute bare bones necessity of what's required for you to attain liberation, right? That where they have full on cognitive models that are helpful in the training process, but you don't have to learn them necessarily, but you could, and they help. When you look at those models, there's some debate about whether or not, when you gain some concentration, whether or not what you're seeing is how something actually is, or if what you're seeing is basically a distortion created by your mind, and exactly what aspects of it, if it's distorted to some degree, what aspects of it are distorted and what aspects are not distorted. So this is a very deep, very, very deep subject. If I'm offering my opinion from the school I think is best, I would rely on the Niyamaka Prasangika system, the middle way consequentialists. And what they say is that every single perception you have, everything you see, smell, taste, touch, hear, think, cognize, even know without thinking, right? Every single one of these is infused with misperception, avidya, misknowing of the object. That the very seeing of my hand on your screen involves seeing it wrongly. Not that the hand doesn't exist, but the way that you know it to exist is wrong. The hand exists dependently based upon dependent origination. The way that you know the hand to exist, or apprehend, they would say, I hate that word, but there it is, it's everywhere. The way you understand the hand to exist or comprehend the hand to exist, even non-conceptually in a state of concentration, you understand it to exist independently. I had a lovely conversation with a gentleman who's been a student now for a couple of months, and he trains, relatively hard. He trains 2 or sometimes 3 hours a day. And we were talking about this subject for the first time, and we got to the point where we were talking about a car, and we went through, well, is the car inside the car or is it outside the car? Obviously, it's not outside the car. Is it the parts of the car, or is it a part of the car, or does it pervade the car? What is this thing that makes a car what it is, and where is it? Okay, well, if it is one of the parts of a car, you shouldn't be able to identify a car by seeing any of the parts. You should have to see the part that is a car. Furthermore, you should be able to throw away every single part of a car besides the car part and still have a car, because you have the part that makes it what it is. There is no such thing, right? There's just the parts. Okay, well, fine. Is there something that pervades all of the parts that makes it a car? In other words, is there some quality that pervades all of the things that are there making up the car that makes it a car? Well, if there was, you could cut a car in half and have 2 cars. That'd be pretty convenient. But instead, you have 2 halves of a car. If the thing that made it a car pervaded all the parts equally, every part would be a car, which is obviously not how it works. Okay, well then fine. Smart guy. It must be all the collection of parts together. We have solved it, have we not? It's just the collection of parts. That's what a car is. No, that's not it either, because if that was it, getting rid of even a single atom of the car should go out of existence. And yet we can replace every part of the car one by one and still have a car. So it's not the collection of parts. And if some of you are now feeling, since there's no car inside the car and there's no car outside the car, if some of you are now feeling that Yeah, but there's a car somewhere. Somehow it's there. I just can't find, right? That's called grasping at inherent existence. That feeling you have that, no, it must really be there in the way that I see it. I see it as being there like this. And I just can't, if I just think about it enough, I'll find it. I'll find the car. I'll find it in there, right? That is called grasping at inherent existence, grasping at a self of the car. That process of grasping at an inherent self of the car that process of grasping at an inherent self of a car is pre-conceptual, pre-philosophical, pre-religious, pre-thought. It happens at the level of perception. You look at the car and it seems like there's something in it making it what it is, or something about it making it what it is. And since when you look for that thing, you can't find it, huge numbers of debates have been had about this in the West and in the East. Right? So the Madhyamaka Prasangika school says every single object you see, conceptually, non-conceptually, you have this grasping at inherent existence. You see it existing the wrong way. You see it existing without depending upon causes and conditions, without depending upon parts and whole, without depending upon subject and object. It's a little Tibetan debate, right? So you see it without depending upon any of these things. If you didn't, you wouldn't feel that feeling of grasping after it when you proved it wasn't there. But you do. So like this, since you see absolutely everything wrongly, can you encounter reality directly as it is anywhere? Well, the Madhyamaka Prasangas say yes, in one place. Because of past karma, everything that appears to you, even non-conceptually, even in your deepest states of concentration, every single thing that appears will appear with an ontology, with a mode of existence that isn't real. In the same way that you looked for that car, you couldn't find the car, and yet you're still grasping after it as if, oh, no, if I keep looking, I'll find it in there. No, you won't. It's not inside the car. It's not outside the car. It's not the parts. It's not pervading the parts. It's not among the parts. There's no other option. It's not some magical invisible force, because you can tell what a car is from miles away. It's obvious. So, like this, every single perception you have is wrong in terms of how things exist. Since every perception of how you see things is wrong, there's no state of concentration on any object besides maybe one that can be of any ultimate use. They can be of temporary use, but not ultimate use. So what perception can help? What perception is not deceptive? Because this is deceptive. It seems to exist, appears to exist because of past karma. The way the appearance comes into existence because of past karma, it appears wrongly to you. Right? So because of this, what perception isn't like that? What perception isn't deceptive in this way? Direct perception of emptiness. Direct perception of the fact that this thing doesn't exist independently. It exists instead dependently. It depends on various causes, conditions, etc. So the fact that this depends upon various causes and conditions, etc., means that it's not independent of various causes and conditions, etc., right? Therefore, the only direct perception of a thing as an ordinary being you can have that isn't deceptive is your direct perception of the actual ontological fact, the way this thing exists, the way yourself exists, the way your phone exists, the way the computer exists. Like this. Now, a Buddha sees this differently, because the way this appears to a Buddha in their own experience, it appears to the Buddha as what's called a mere conventionality. It doesn't appear in a deceptive conventionality like it does to us. That potential for it to appear wrongly has been removed in the mind of a Buddha, and therefore what appears to them doesn't appear to exist inherently existent. A Buddha sees the mere conventional existence of this object and its ultimate nature at the same time. We don't. And unless you train in Tantra and generate extremely subtle minds, that's even according to the sutra systems, it's not possible for you to do that, to see ultimate and conventional simultaneously. But in Tantra, you can. This is part of the reason Tantra is so fast, if you can do it. If you can't do it, it's really slow. But if you've already spent, like, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in a particular lineage, marinating in that lineage, and then you do the tantric practices of that lineage, it can be very fast. Okay. Moving on. Mental proliferation, conceptual elaboration. Okay. Does mental elaboration arise from thought itself or from craving, conceit? In a technical sense, I'm not sure. You'd have to go to an Abhidharma text. From a practice standpoint, speaking from the hip, I would say it could that's a road that probably goes both ways. Because there are times that you look at this object and go, oh, that's a beautiful object. And then through exaggerating its positive qualities, you then form thoughts, elaborations about its exaggerated positive qualities. Right? But then other times you haven't exaggerated the positive qualities of this object, and you go about thinking about all sorts of aspects about it, and then you start exaggerating the positive qualities. And then you generate craving on the basis of having elaborated inappropriately on but it's a beautiful cup. It's a lovely cup, my precious. Okay. How do I combat giving myself permission to be overcome by my feelings, knowing that they're inevitable without nirvana? Okay, no, this is a good point. You have to take a long-term perspective, right? Best case scenario, probably for most of us, 3 lifetimes. Some of us maybe this lifetime, I hope. Most of us maybe 3 lifetimes, 7 lifetimes, 15 lifetimes. If you take your vows and you keep your vows as best you can, and you do your practices as best you can, from lifetime to lifetime, they say you'll improve as a practitioner, and you're on your way. So you just do your best to not do... you do your best to not chase stuff you know is going to hurt you and hurt other people. That's it, There's no sort of secret sauce. You just do your best to not do those things. And then you do your daily practice, working on whatever aspect you're currently working on, because you can't work on everything at the same time. You do your study, working on whatever aspects of study and deepening your understanding of things improves your ability to do the part that you're working on, or stuff that's coming up, or understanding the whole structure of the whole path. And that's it, Unfortunately, there's no sort of magic key. You just have to do what you can from day to day, and over time it gets better. Yeah. And with the stuff that I teach, because I know, Dave, you're doing the whole thing, you're doing 5 foundations, and you're doing the 18 Lohan practice and all that, at least as much as you can with everything else you have going on. So, yeah, that's plenty, That's plenty. And at some point, if you're also adding on or maintaining connections with a lineage, and you're getting some teachings to that lineage and enriching your understanding of the whole thing, then over time, over a number of years, you'll see things will change. Over 3 years, 6 years, usually you see the biggest changes over a number of years. Some of the techniques I teach, that they give you results very, very quickly. But then what I tell people is probably 4 to 5 years with my material, if you were doing it seriously, to get a nice grounding. And then you can go whichever direction you want with whatever practices you want. The reason it takes that long is you'll have a bunch of changes and experiences and all sorts of stuff probably in the first 2 or 3 years. But then you have to figure out, okay, now that I have done all this stuff and I can access this stuff, what do I use it for? How do I actually use it? What's it for? Where does it fit in terms of an overall training? And that takes more time, because as I've said many times, it's a set of tools to work with yourself. It's a set of tools to know what you are as a being. And it takes time to learn what the tool is, and then to learn what it's used for and when and how. So, for better or worse, it just takes some time. The nobleman, very welcome. Glad to have you. What are my thoughts on Alan Watts? Alan Watts is an extremely persuasive public speaker. Would I recommend Alan Watts? No. I would recommend hundreds of other things. If no enduring self exists, who suffers, practices, realizes cessation without covertly reintroducing a self? Yeah, but the thing is, an unenduring self exists. There's no unchanging self because there's a changing self. So the self that's changing, and over time, if you zoom out and you're looking at a process, this person here with these qualities began the process, and then they became this person who has different qualities, and they became this person who has different qualities, and this one who has different qualities. But it's a continuum of causal events. There's no enduring person that was the central pole around which everything else was spinning, but there's a causal series of events in which, sort of like you were a kid at one point, and now you don't have the qualities of being a kid. You have the qualities of being whatever you happen to be now. Some of you teenagers, some of you 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, older, whatever you happen to be, right? So it's like this. You don't stay the same, but there's a continuum of causal events. It's that continuum of causal events that's going through the process. The other thing is, you do have a self, right? The Buddha explicitly rejects the view that you don't have a self. And the Buddha explicitly rejects the view that you do have a self. And he explicitly rejects the view that you both do and do not have a self. And also rejects the view that you neither don't have a self nor have a self. Hope that helps. I mean, kidding aside, this is what the Buddha teaches, but this should be a clue that the Buddha is only referring to certain categories of self, right? Because you either have a self or you don't, or both, or neither, and there's no additional possibilities. So if the Buddha is rejecting all of these, then he must be putting forward some other position that doesn't exist within the binary framework in which you think everything must exist. Right? That should be pretty clear from the way he's making his argument. Unless he's just being obtuse. But I don't think he is. I think he's making a very rational statement. He's saying if you define the self as an eternal, unchanging, inherent, self-sufficiently existent entity, truly existent entity with certain kinds of properties, if you're defining it that way, that one doesn't exist at all. On the other hand, let's set that one over here. We rejected this. If you're saying there's no self whatsoever, that's also not the position I'm putting forward. So I've rejected two categories so far. This misapprehension, misunderstanding, misperception of self as utterly unchanging, eternal, partless, etc., etc., etc. And I've rejected the utter non-existence of a self. Now, if somebody said, well, then you must be putting forward that both of those are true. Well, no, that would just be putting two contradictory things together. Well, you must be saying that the truth is that it's neither one of those, right? And that the final truth is that there's no truth of that kind at all. Well, no, that's also not it. So what the Buddha is saying is that you, in brief, see a self that exists independently, and he puts forward a self that exists dependently. Since you see a self that exists independently, the self you put forward doesn't exist at all. But the Buddha's position is not that no self exists at all. His position is that the self you put forward doesn't exist at all. Not that there's no self whatsoever, because there's a dependently arisen self. There's just no independently arisen self in the way you're putting forward. So both of the binary positions have been rejected. So you don't have to covertly reintroduce anything at all. You have a self. That self is going to attain enlightenment. Something validly imputable as a self will attain enlightenment. How do you know? Because the Buddha under the Bodhi tree said, I recalled all my past lives. Then I saw countless beings going up and down according to karma. And then I achieved liberation. Ta-da! Which self did all that? The dependently arisen one, right? You know? So this isn't actually that mysterious. It's pretty straightforward. It's not that counterintuitive. It's just counterintuitive because our instinct is that if you have negated the existence of self, that what you're left with is nothing, no self whatsoever. Or that if you're not saying there's no self whatsoever, then what you're saying is that there's an independently existent self. And the Buddha is saying, no, those aren't the correct positions. There's a dependently arisen self. Okay. Why does bliss arise with sufficient concentration? It's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever seen an official answer for why it happens. It's just widely known that it does happen. I have seen it said that the nature of consciousness is bliss. And bliss in the sense not of like overwhelming sort of swimming, dancing joy, but bliss in the sense of peace. That there is a profound, that consciousness itself is deeply peaceful, and that this is a blissful condition. So, as you get closer to accessing what consciousness is actually like, well, yeah, there's also that, right? There's the fact that if you're how to say, if you're yeah no, you're right on. Like if you're saying that you sit down and you're used to your mind being totally out of control, filled with negative emotions, negative thoughts, distracted, boom 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 boom, and you calm it down for the first time, then you go, whoa, this is nice. But I think that that's along the lines of what we're talking about, that the bliss is related to the fact that the mind is calm. And then also the physical bliss, right? I mean, if you look at some of the classical texts, one of the things that happens is that the winds start to move in a certain way when you attain concentration, and this creates something called mental and physical suppleness, and that makes it possible for you to sit for weeks or months at a time without sleeping, eating, drinking, or needing to move your body without destroying your body. And so there's something physically that changes when you do a lot of concentration practice. Not a little bit, but we're talking 6 months to a year of retreat probably for most people. Okay, let's see. Provisional non-biting function. I'm not sure what you mean, Gong Show. In what I'm saying is you have a self. It's a dependently arisen self, and that dependently arisen self will attain enlightenment. So it's not a provision. That's going to be true even after you attain enlightenment. Sammy asks if moksha is the same as nirvana. Those are generally synonymous terms, I would say, although I think moksha has slightly less scope than nibbana, although I could be wrong about that. I have the sense, and don't quote me on this, but I have the sense that moksha is liberation. Moksha is liberation in the sense that you could attain liberation in this lifetime, for example, but then nibbana is the actual final state of nibbana. So you could have nibbana with remainder, you could have nibbana without remainder, you could have non-abiding nibbana. So then the actual result, where you've attained liberation, entered into some kind of nibbana, is nibbana. But again, I that may be a distinction that I'm just making up in my head. That's not a real thing. But in any case, yeah, I think generally speaking, moksha. What is moksha? Unbinding? Because nibbana means to blow something out, to blow out a candle. In any case, I think they are used interchangeably in places. Kalyana Mitra. Kalyana Mitra. Is that rejoicing or? Oh, admirable friendship. Sorry. Right. So when you look at the definition of a virtuous friend, I think the only place in the Pali where it's defined, interestingly enough, is it's defined in relation to lay people, which is kind of, in terms of suttas, I think the only place it's defined is in relation to lay people. And if I'm not mistaken, there are 4 qualities that they talk about. Broadly, I think they talk about a layperson who's consummate in generosity, consummate in ethics, consummate in, what is it? Faith, I think. Conviction, something like this, and then maybe something else. I can't remember exactly. So the point is that in order to be a virtuous friend, you need to have enough capability that other people, relatively speaking, don't have those capabilities, and they can come to you to gain them. So that when they're around you, when they talk to you, when you engage with them, their generosity increases, their ethics increase, their conviction in things like karma, rebirth, holy beings with clairvoyance, and ability to see things like karma and rebirth, the results of training and concentration and attaining nibbana and all this, right? That through being with you, talking with you, engaging with you, their good qualities increase. So this is the meaning of virtuous friendship. So in terms of as a model for sort of spiritual care, because knowing what you do, I'm not sure that's the right concept for it. I think what may be a better framework is just to look at metta, to look at goodwill, to look at compassion under that rubric. Because virtuous friendship more often is well, really, I think exclusively is talking about the teacher-mentor relationship. That kind of thing. And in brief, you seek out people that know more than you do. You spend time around them. You talk to them. You ask them questions. And as you do, you gain better qualities. So if you want to be a teacher, you need to have better qualities than the people you're teaching. When you look at the Mahayana sources, they then name, I think, 8 qualities. And don't quote me, and I definitely won't get them in order, but in brief, they need to have ethics, concentration, wisdom, patience, loving kindness or compassion, a deep knowledge of the scriptures, eloquence in teaching, and I can't remember the last. But if you have a teacher that has these qualities, and you can discern those from the outside, if you're observant and you observe them over a period of time, you can see that they have good ethics because they're basically their activities are peaceful, right, through their ahimsa. You can tell they have concentration because their emotions and minds stay quite stable. You can tell that they have some understanding of wisdom, either a correct conceptual understanding of emptiness and selflessness or a direct insight because, once again, their mind stays very peaceful. Loving kindness and compassion because they're putting the needs of the trainees ahead of their own needs, right? They genuinely care how it's turning out and do their best to make sure that things are structured in such a way that people are actually making progress. They have patience, meaning they have the ability to describe what's needed for other people's training over and over and over and over and over again without getting worn out and without getting frustrated and that sort of thing. They have deep knowledge of the scriptures, so they have this ocean-like understanding. So when you go to them, quite often, you know, as with my teachers, it seems like you go to them and they just know unbelievable amounts of information about everything you ask them. And then eloquence. Ideally, they're also a good teacher, right? Ideally, they're also good at putting words together and explaining things so that you can understand them. Now, the scriptures on this also says, okay, now if you can't get all those things, then at least, I think generosity maybe is the last one. Yeah, generosity in teaching. Maybe. You say at least you want to get someone who has a little bit of metta and has more good qualities than you, right? Because they should care about you, because that's a really important ingredient to them teaching. They should care about you. They'd have some loving kindness there, and they should at least have some better qualities than you so they can take you further down the path. And it doesn't mean they need to have all of them, right? Maybe somebody's ethics aren't great, but they have really great knowledge of a particular subject. So you go, okay, I'm going to study with this person to get the knowledge of this thing, but I'm not going to follow them in terms of ethics. Or maybe their ethics are good, concentration's good, but they don't understand the wisdom part very well, but their metta is really good. Okay, well, I'm going to train with them in the metta and this and that and this and that. And you kind of decide, you know, what you're going to train in people with and what advice you're going to take from them and what advice you're not going to take from them based upon their character and other things you know and whatever. That kind of thing. At least in a sutra context, right? What is my definition of mental stillness? Well, if I'm talking about shamatha, the definition, it's not my definition. Definition is A highly lucid, highly stable, unbiased state of mind that knows its object without adding or subtracting qualities. Characterized by mental and physical suppleness. Highly lucid, highly stable, unbiased state of mind that knows its object without adding or subtracting qualities, characterized by mental and physical suppleness. That's a concentrated mind. That's a mind that's actually stable and still in the relevant sense for advanced training. Are you going to do that next Tuesday? Probably not. Most of the texts say you need at least 6 months in retreat to accomplish that kind of mind. Some people recommend a year. Some sources say that if you use tantric techniques, it'll take less time, but you'll still need probably around 3 months or 4 months. Some of my teachers from other areas say you can accomplish that while living in the real world. You need to do a little bit of retreat from time to time, but you can do it in the real world. I'm giving that a go. All right, my friends. I think I missed a question. Can you please share something important that Mr. Whitfield said that stayed with you and can benefit us? Yeah. Stand up straight. And do the next right thing. Hmm. Best way to practice right effort. Effort comes from your worldview. You develop, it comes from your worldview and your accomplishment of certain practices. If you accomplish certain practices, then the results of those practices will drive you to do more practice. You will have the desire, which will create the effort to do more practice. Before the results of the practice occur, let's say training and concentration, for example, before you have some of the results of concentration that then drive the practice, you need to have a worldview that motivates, why am I doing this? Why is this important? What are the consequences of not doing this? So by answering the why question, both in the affirmative and the negative, what are the consequences of not doing this and what are the benefits of doing this? By answering the why question, you generate desire. That desire leads to effort. Yeah? So this comes straight out of the classics. Straight out of the classics. Your worldview creates the desire and the effort. Okay. Kumar asks, what is enlightenment? I'm going to fill in the blanks on the question. What is enlightenment? Enlightenment is defined in various ways in different Buddhist schools. I don't actually like putting them on an earlier and later spectrum. There were debates for centuries about exactly what is meant by something like omniscience. One of the Buddha's qualities is having an omniscient mind. What does it mean to have an omniscient mind? Does that mean that your mind can look at any one object and know what it is with no obstructions? Does it mean that your mind pervades out everywhere and knows all objects simultaneously? There are a lot of questions one might ask about the nature of omniscience. Does an omniscient mind know all future events? Does it know all past events? Does it know all present events? Does it know the just events and things, or does it also know the minds of sentient beings? Does it, in addition to knowing the minds of sentient beings, does it understand complex relationships between mere objects, let's say, in reality? If it only understands the objects and not the relationships between the objects, right? There's a lot of different ways you can start thinking through what is omniscience, blah, 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 blah. In any case, omniscience is one of the qualities of a Buddha. And then the Buddha also understands the nature of reality, emptiness, understands the diversity of things, but also the ultimate nature of things. And he understands the ontology, how things exist, and he understands what exists. So the diversity of all things and the way in which all things exist. The Buddha's mind understands both of those things. Then a Buddha has compassion for other sentient beings and wants to free them from suffering. And a Buddha has the ability to create emanations, both emanations that appear to be conscious beings and emanations that appear to be inanimate objects, and can appear, according to the scriptures, things like the Lotus Sutra, or the garland of something, can't remember. It's from the Agamas. Very important text in Zen, though. This text I'm forgetting says that Buddhas can generate an infinite number of emanations to benefit other beings. An infinite number of bodies, you could say. Some of those bodies are in what's called form. And amongst form, there are subtle forms and there are coarse forms. Coarse forms are things like us, right? Physical matter. Subtle forms are made of something that isn't coarse matter, but is still basically material or physical, but much more flexible and interesting than coarse physical matter. So a Buddha can appear with a form body of subtle form or a emanation body of coarse material matter. And so the Buddha is said sometimes to have three bodies. The mental body, you could say, that encompasses their knowledge of emptiness and selflessness and the diversity of all interdependent things. The form body, which is the way that they appear, sort of, let's say, kind of like a celestial appearance to beings who have the ability to see such forms. And then emanation bodies, which are made of coarser materials, material matter and such, that could be animate or inanimate, and sometimes could appear as Buddhas, or could appear as virtually anything else that benefits other beings. So this is a broad description. Many other things are in the description. I mean, many things I've read and forgotten over the years. There's a lot. Buddha's a very complex concept. But those are some of the primary qualities. What is emptiness? Emptiness is the absence of independent an independent mode of existence. So this cup depends upon a lot of stuff, right? It depends upon the existence of the universe in which certain conditions are maintained for protons, electrons, and neutrons to be able to assemble in a particular way, blah, blah, blah. It also depends upon, subject and object, at least in a certain fashion, because the color orange and the color black are a perceptual phenomenon, not a physical phenomenon. And so there are aspects of this cup, certainly even from a scientific point of view, that depend upon a subject-object relationship in order for them to exist with that kind of appearance. So things exist dependently. Things are relationships. Things are not independent entities. Since they aren't independent entities, we say that they are empty of being an independent entity. There's no independent entity in there. There's only the relationships that make up the relational entity. All right, Gong Show asks if momentum's a useful metaphor for karma. I think momentum is a useful metaphor for karma. I think in particular it's good for merit, which I have come to understand over the years as a particular subcategory of karma that's taking you closer to the results of the path. So with merit, you're building up a certain amount of momentum that's headed a certain way. And according to some Mahayana sources, for example, at least in discussions with my teachers about it, I haven't read this anywhere, but from discussions with my teachers and so forth, the way that a Buddha can predict when you're going to attain enlightenment, even though you have free will, is that at a certain point you have so much momentum headed a certain way that you're now going there. You know, you're rolling down the hill towards that destination and there's nowhere for you to fall off. You're going to end up there at the appointed time because the momentum now is so strong. So this is how a Buddha could predict the future event, even though you still have free will. You're going to end up using your free will according to the conditions, and you'll end up attaining enlightenment. And therefore, the Buddha can predict, yes, in 7 more lifetimes at this moment, you're going to attain enlightenment now. So, yeah, I think momentum in that way is kind of helpful, that there's a sort of what is it called? An inertia that's now taking you a certain direction, and to stop you from moving that way would require force, a lot of force moving the other way. Right, Thich Nhat Hanh. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh is a very good teacher. I think Thich Nhat Hanh I think Thich Nhat Hanh has a certain appeal in the way that he teaches that is meant to be broad, very broad in its ability to be accepted by a lot of people. And he did a lot of work, I think, to try to make his teachings as, how to say, that his teachings could grab the widest possible, sort of embrace the widest possible group. Now, the only issue with taking that approach is that to do that, you have to not emphasize certain things. Even though he taught a lot about rebirth, actually, he didn't emphasize the teachings on rebirth because that alienates some people. I don't know that he was doing it for that reason, but he didn't emphasize that aspect, even though he gave teachings on it. Anyways, there's a number of other issues that are related to this, like the way that he spends a lot of time in a couple of places working on the relationship between Christianity and Buddhism. Personally, I didn't find his solution to those issues very compelling. As a person trained in theology, I couldn't accept 99% of the arguments he made. And I don't think any theologian alive could accept the arguments that he made about Christianity and the relationship of Christianity and Buddhism. It's arguments that would only work for a person who's sort of on the edge already between Christianity and Buddhism and wants them to fit together. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like appealing to a wide range of Christians who aren't quite yet ready to give up their Christian understandings, but are interested in Buddhism and want to sort of somehow fit the two together, even though I don't think they fit. And if you were taking your Christianity seriously and your theology seriously, the solutions he came up with absolutely couldn't work, not even a little bit. So that means that it can't be for a Christian audience. It has to be for a different audience. So yeah, I think he teaches some mindfulness practice, and I mean he's Vietnamese Zen, right? So I think he has some Zen teachings, but I don't know what practices are. A fair amount of metta practice, I think, but I don't know all the practices that are under the Thich Nhat Hanh umbrella. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of experience or knowledge of the actual practices they do and teach. I know they do a lot of stuff in the world, engaged practice, but okay. Alive versus living? Not sure. So in regards to karma kagyu, I'd prefer not to get into detail. If I don't have glowing things to say about a particular lineage, then generally I just recommend to people to do something else. So no problem, If you like Kagyu stuff, there's a lot of different lineages of Kagyu. I would recommend, personally, if you were asking my opinion, to do any of the other major or minor lineages of Kagyu rather than the karma one. That's all. Not a whole lot I want to say about that other than that. What do I like most about the Gelug? What I like most about the Gelug is that when you ask a question, it has a very good answer. The Gelug have taken an extraordinary amount of time, effort, and care in defining things with extreme precision and then debating them for centuries until those critical definitions and critical things that are being accepted by the school are like so crisp, just absolutely crisp. And then the way it's communicated and taught from generation to generation maintains that crispness from generation to generation. And so as a person who likes things to really fit together well intellectually, the Gelug is just, it's so well designed. The way all the pieces fit, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's what I like most about the Gelug. Right. We have arrived at 3 hours, so I'm going to call it an evening, my friends. Thank you all for attending. Once again, final commercial break for the day. I do all this for free if you joined late. I have classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday for meditation. It's not open Q&A, it's just meditation class. Also here on YouTube, do that for free. Lots of phone calls and stuff I make, talking to people throughout the week, usually about their practice. All of that is also for free. The way I'm able to do this full-time for free is that the community offers donations and contributions in various kinds. So if you find value in this, you'd like this to continue, you'd like me to be able to do this for more people, go to the description down below, or one of the moderators can put it into the chat. Make a contribution on PayPal, on Venmo, and that'll allow me to do this for one more month. If a few people that have relatively good means can chip in what they can, then a lot of people that can't chip in or whatever will be able to do this for free, which is the idea, that the community supports what I do so that I can do it for a lot more people for free. Also, if you want to train in my meditation techniques, in the description for the video down below is the 5 Foundations course. That's a great way to support what I'm doing, and I've talked a bunch about the other things that I do with that course. You have a community, and eventually we're going to support each other doing long-term retreat. And if you want a complete cultivation system that also involves the body and the energy body, 18 Lohan is also linked down below. And that I've partnered with Neil Ripsky, fantastic internal Chinese martial artist. 40 years of experience, trained at Jingwu, the legendary Jingwu organization, the Canadian branch for that organization, and holds 3 different lineages of full-on Chinese martial arts. In addition to having trained in the 3 great internal Chinese martial arts, Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, he also holds this rare, the great-grandfather, let's say, of all the Chinese martial arts, 18 Lohan. 18 Lohan has a complete cultivation system, basically Buddhist yoga, sort of physical yogas. It has Qigong, and it has Neigong, internal, very, very subtle types of internal work. And so I've partnered with him to teach my stuff in his course, to teach my stuff throughout his course. So if you join his course, that's another way you can support what I'm doing. Also a great way to meet me in person eventually, because I plan on doing more in-person Lohan things than I will ever do in-person meditation things on my own. For reasons that all of you already know if you've been here for a while. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you all being here. Thank you for attending. Hope to see you again very soon. Try not to disappear on me before I do. Okay.